Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture on media representation and marginal gender. This lecture is a part of the paper on media and margins. Through this lecture, you will gain an understanding about the media representation in the context of marginality and gender. This is a topic that hovers around two very contemporary and vital issues that needs serious deliberation and in-depth understanding. At the end of this lecture, you should be in a position to look into marginality in the context of gender critically. Before we begin, it is imperative to understand that media representation takes place within the social setting and that media has a strong connection with the society. As Dennis McCullin, his study on media roles in society suggests key areas in which media is allied to the society. He advised the following points in theorizing the association between media and the society: that the media intensely impacts the society for better or for worse. B. Media is a mirror that echoes the happenings in the society, and thus media representation is more of a result that echoes. C. The association is a collaborative and cyclic one, with no perfect line of effect, and that D. Media are a cultural and social occurrence of society. Keeping this in mind, you should understand that the media has important functions in a society. 1. Media is the source of information and facilitates democratic processes by acting as the medium of communication between the people and the government. 2. Media has a collaborative role in cases where the larger needs of a society becomes a priority and requires collaboration of the media with other agencies. 3. The critical role of media is of significance here. In simple words, critical role of media implies moving further than predictable information giving. It necessitates that the media takes a position for a cause or belief in cases where minority or others are being victimized or dispossessed. Here, it is crucial to understand that media representation upholds and further fortifies social standards. It is also essential to recognize that the media is much more than merely being a whisperer of information. It has the capability to tell the people what to think about. You will agree that the mass media touches people's lives interminably from infancy to old age. Finance and revenue generation are critical determining factor of mass communication engagements and media organizations. In the context of Indian media, be it print or electronic, class, caste and gender have a major influence on media's engagement with varied issues and its subsequent representation. You must have noticed that the Indian media adore controversy and engage in statement journalism. It is a rampant practice where media telecasts or print information without verification or over-sensationalizes the issue. While it is evident that in all quarters of life, media representation is an omnipresent phenomenon. Thereby, it should be understood that media representations are the method using which media represents or embodies particular groups, people, knowledge, philosophies or issues from a specific ethical or ideological perspective. You should bear in mind that media representation is not solely about duplicating or reverberating reality. Media representation is also suggestive of the process of representing or reconstructing a new reality. For instance, if you take a look at the jewelry advertisements, it is shown that without gifting a diamond ring, a boy cannot propose a girl, thereby drawing home the idea that diamond is a must for expressing love. This in turn influences the mind of the people, and Western concept is introduced in the society. Yet another example drawn from cinema, where women are seldom the lead in the film. They are by and large given the side role as the love interest of the hero. Also, when women-centric films are made, a lot of effort has to be put to promote the film such that the audiences goes to theatre. It is also reflective of how media operates in the same way as the society, where women are still struggling to break the restraints of patriarchy. Before we go ahead with our discussion, it is of prime importance to understand two other concepts, namely marginality and gender. The word marginal comes from the Latin word marginalis, which in simply refers to a brink or border. In sociology, the concept was introduced by Robert Park, who denoted the marginal man as a cultural hybrid, drawing the example of immigrants who once upon a time in the United States found themselves in the middle of two worlds, one being their homeland and the other being America. More explicitly, sociologist Everett Stonquist III pointed out to the Jew as the archetypical illustration of the marginal man. Research on marginality universally supposes a graded association amongst the marginal and the non-marginal. Commonly, this affiliation is articulated via the center-periphery theory, where the marginal are located at the periphery. Over the years, it has been argued by scholars that the communities of people who experience life on the peripheries are deprived of opportunities and means that are generally accessible to dominant groups like lodging, employment, healthcare, civic facilities and the like. The marginalized are continuously conscious of their position in relation to those at the center, wherein they are voiceless and absent in one sense. In case of India, for example, people from tribal areas, Dalits, elderlies, sexual minorities, people of certain religious groups and other lower castes are considered to be marginalized. As an outcome of marginality, people are rendered incapable of making meaningful contribution to the society. It has to be understood that the level and extent of marginality varies based on the level of development of society economically, culturally and politically. Now, you should also gain a precise understanding of gender. Understanding gender. In the modern times, gender has become an important concern in the academia owing to the rise in the feminist activism in India, principally after the post-independence era. In the last few years, a great part of the feminist scholarship has been dedicated in the direction of emphasizing the social structure of gender. Gender is commonly used word which can carry diverse meanings. In any kind of study, it is customary to put forth a clear difference between sex, for example, biology and its undertaking to define manliness and feminineness, and gender, for example, cultural beliefs and customs connected to sex, most universally definitive standard conception of individual characteristics linked with sex which is ultimately enunciated in femaleness and maleness. The notion that developed what sex is a biological concept and by contrast gender is a social construct. Through this idea has been profoundly contested. Scholars orate that it is challenging to demarcate the biological and social construct of gender, and as Judith wrote in the book Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, gender cannot be conceived merely as a cultural inscription on a pre-given sex, must also designate the very apparatus by which sex is produced as natural. Gender, by this means, has to be understood in the framework of the social world which encompasses discourse, cultural and symbolic territories. Gender is also deemed to be one of the stimuli that help in the sculpting social life. It is seen as an arrangement of social practices which produces and maintains gender dissimilarities. Here, it can be concluded that gender is being persistently shaped and reshaped. Correspondingly, it is not merely a trait of personalities, but shifts at all levels of the social organization, whereby it becomes a multifaceted occurrence. In this background, you should understand that how social observances like communication and social organizations reproduce gender, male, female, third and transgender. Correlating media and marginal. A. Marginality is an inescapable phenomenon of any society. B. It is propagated across generations through varied socio-political institutions. C. Marginality is a cyclic process, and media is inevitably a partaker in this process of propagating the customary marginality or initiating a paradigm shift in the entire discourse on marginality. Media research over a period of time has highlighted the fact that the media replicates portion of the daily prejudiced practices faced by members of marginalized groups through offensive and insulting transcripts or languages, or through other strategies like relegation and exclusion from media discourses. On the other hand, the media also nurtures dialogues that endeavors to ascertain the difficulties concerning discrimination and social marginalization of members of marginalized societies. It is vital to remember that media treatises have the capacity to not only present but reasonably form social practices. In other words, media validates or impeaches particular social practices. For example, certain media discourses have an inclination to legitimatize non-heterosexual behavior, while others tend to denunciate it. While one part of the media represents a constructive discourse on drug addiction or HIV, sex changes, sex services for a profit, choice of clothes of women by men, while others is set as a negative tone. The case of gender marginality via the media also follows the same course. To start with, if you analyze any media report on rape, you will notice that offenders if below 18 years of age are called juveniles in the reports. While a continuous battle is on to change the law that in case of heinous crime like rape, offenders should be considered as juveniles. Media's representation on such matters set the tone for debate across the society, whereby women are still blamed for being raped. You may also notice that in the news media, when there is a discussion on child sex abuse, the focus is on the girl child, whereas statistics reveal that the male child is equally a victim of child sex abuse, but media seldom reports on it, thus marginalizing the male victims of child sex abuse. Does it not imply that media is equivocally nurturing the Indian patriarchal notion of men being physically strong? Men do not cry, and that men cannot be victims of such atrocities? Media plays a pivotal role in producing social norms, since numerous forms of media comprising of television news, television serials, advertisements, ad films, and all pervading in current culture. Gender roles and stereotypes persists especially because society as a whole not only opts to accept them, but they are disseminated by the media. Conspicuous viewers ought to be aware of what the media is demonstrating to them, and so that they do not take part in the vicious cycle of marginalization. Young children today are exposed to stereotypical gender connotations through the advertisements and cartoons. If you watch any cartoon show like Tinkerbell, depiction of the female is made through curvaceous body, big eyes and so on. Male characters are depicted as warriors and fighters. Similarly, in the advertisement of Dove, never has a male child been shown running after the mother, indicating looking pretty is the prerogative of the female. Advertisements of detergent soap, health drinks, and this kind of shows female as the housekeeper examples are endless to reiterate the idea that media replicates and mirrors the gender marginalization which is prevalent in the society. The power of media has increased manifold to such a magnitude that a person finds it challenging to uphold an identity and self-understanding without using media as the reference point. Philosophies, worldview and the approaches of socializations are significantly predisposed by the media. Across the globe, media is being critiqued for being insensitive to gender issues and reinforcing the hackneyed portrayal of women as homemakers, third genders and transgender as comical or entertaining characters and male as macho. The intersection of gender and marginalization in the media can be overlooked more so at a time when it is expected the media to kindle new philosophy about gender roles in the society. Pick up any Indian soap opera of the current times, Nagin, Sat Nivana Satya, Kum Kum Bhagya, etc. It is highly regressive, wherein women are glammed up like dolls who are primarily housewives, which is far from reality. Women are reflected as sorry pastiches of what women should to be, but infrequently who they are in real life. If one looks at the development of web series, one can still find a different approach at representing gender, though it is still a far-fetched battle. For instance, Ladies' Room, Girl in the City, Galiappa and the like are among a sequence of recent women-centric web series about the ordinary lives and trepidations of women. It can be said that in a small way they are bridging the colossal gap in the manner in which women are portrayed both Indian television and Bollywood. But the problem lies in the fact that women-centric media, text irrespective of its approach, is produced by the media, which creates an arena to rethink about media content and its ideology. The level of gender marginalization takes a deep set since third gender and transgender still do not get any representation in the media. They continue to dwell in the periphery of media production, which is similar to their social existence as well. Historically, in all forms of art, literature, cinema, advertisements, and the news media, there have been illustrations of the inconsiderate falsification of transgender stories. Sexual identity or sexual preference is regularly jumbled with gender identity, which is indicative of an individual's personal perception of self as male, female, a combination of both, or none. Media producers themselves have failed to comprehend that being transgender has no connection with sexual orientation. Since this awareness is absent among the media managers, it is but natural that they continue to propagate the wrong notions. However, it is not just about mere awareness, but also about misguided information. You will agree that it is extremely vital that the sexually marginalized communities have a say in the content generation, such that the stereotypes can be broken and the notions about sexual preference and gender identity can be made clear. It is increasingly being realized that the Indian transgender rhetoric ought to be homespun, progressive, and free from misconstructions. In this direction, some steps have been taken. For instance, in the 2016 edition of International Film Festival of Kerala, organized by the Kerala State Chalachitra Academy, a variety of transgender friendly enterprises. The week-long fest also comprised of a film category on sexual minorities, for the first time captioning it Gender Bender. Further, Nilina Atholi, a young journalist from Mathrubhumi, Delhi, had won the SBT Media Literary Award and the Ramnath Goenka Award for a series on the lives of transgender titled Ardhaji Vartungulade Arakshita Vastakan. This series was an attempt to give sexual minorities and marginal gender prominence and create awareness about their concerns. Many people in the media who campaign for the rights of such groups believe that artistic expression has uninterrupted impression on the lives of belligerent communities, be it women or other sexual minorities, and that it is extremely essential to break the glass ceiling. Now let us shift focus to Indian cinema, wherein gender marginality is evident since times immemorial. Cinema has always operated as a significant instrument for enunciating and disseminating philosophies upon the common masses. The effect of cinema can be felt in the nook and corner of the Indian society. Women have always been depicted as disempowered characters depending on the men for protection. Condensed to a glamorous constituent of the films by dancing around trees, getting kidnapped, raped or killed. Female body in Bollywood more specifically became a leading component for the success of an actress. Their curvy bodies or size 0 bodies speak of the time they toil in gym to get into shape. For instance, the leading lady of the 1980s, Sridevi, was known as the Thunder Thighs. Even the contemporary female actors fall prey to this mainstream gender marginalization, doing item songs and adding glamour quotient to the film. You must have noticed that traditionally Bollywood cinema unfolds two types of stereotypes: the women as righteous, submissive, nurturing family traditions, and the emotional center of the hero. Second, the woman, a sexually aggressive homebreaker or a prostitute. Through these concepts of faithfulness and compliance to the husband, Hindi cinema has effectively entrenched patriarchal ethics. It has been an ongoing battle for female actors to break out of typecasts, and effort has been made by many. Women in Indian cinema have given quivers to patriarchal social norms. For instance, co-founder of Bombay Talkies studio, Devika Rani, was one of the most influential performers of her time and gave Hindi cinema's first kiss. From Devika Rani to Vidya Balan to Radhika Apte, the struggle is far from being over to break the gender marginality. Though some films like Pink, Angry Indian Goddess, Purged, Mardani, Kahani have been assisting in making its headway. Also, it is vital to remember that gender marginality is deeply rooted in the film industry and is not restricted to actors only. Female singers find less work since there are not enough songs for the female actors. Women directors are few, and when it comes to technicians, yet again it is territory of the men. Again, there is the parallel cinema that strives to uphold gender in a different light. Films like Kaushik Ganguly's Arekte Premar Golpo, where Rituparna Ghosh played the role of transgender filmmaker with a bisexual lover. Chitrangada, the crowning wish, written and directed by Rituparna Ghosh, is based on the story of Chitrangada from the Mahabharata, which narrates the story of a choreographer who is struggling with his gender identity. Similarly, Lipstick, Under My Burkha, a Hindi film directed by Alankrita Srivastava, revolves around three women and their fantasy about life. Conclusion. Thus, at the end of this lecture, you ought to keep in mind that media representation is multifaceted and one needs to pick every form of media text for analyze to understand the nuances involved in media representation of the marginal and its outcome. I hope you understand that the patriarchal hegemony that the media till day sustains need to be altered. There is an increasing need to magnify the horizon of Indian media text in relation to content and subject matters such that a correct representation can be presented in front of the mass audience. This cannot be done without actually involving the marginal gender in the mainstream media, thus necessitating the need to construct a space for the marginalized communities and more so for marginalized women, transgender and others. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. For more details, please read the module carefully and attempt the questions at the end. Thank you.